The galaxy had just signed a monumental peace treaty, hailed as the dawn of a new era. For centuries, war had torn through the stars, an endless cycle of violence between the major galactic empires. The Vortoth, a colossal and physically imposing species, were known for their savage conquests. The Xelthar, insectoid and calculating, had carved their empire through treachery and deceit. Then there was the Shaldar, an ancient species whose psychic powers could shatter entire fleets with but a thought. For countless years, these species fought for dominance, with humanity caught in the crossfire. But now something had shifted. The major empires, exhausted by their endless war, had agreed to a ceasefire. The stakes had become too high, and with the rise of smaller, unified factions seeking peaceful coexistence, a truce had been brokered. An era of peace, the likes of which had never been seen in recorded history, was finally upon them. The Galactic Peace Summit, held on the neutral planet of Kalrith, was a symbol of this monumental shift. Delegates from across the galaxy had gathered to celebrate their newfound unity, under the gleaming light of Kalrith's three suns. The planet's capital city, Hyreth, sparkled with monumental structures and lush gardens, a beacon of prosperity in a galaxy once gripped by war. Holographic displays of peace banners and floating fountains decorated the city squares. The galaxy's most prominent leaders mingled at the grand banquet, exchanging polite words over the clinking of glasses. At the center of the celebration was the human delegation. Humble, modest, but influential. Once a fractured species struggling for survival, humanity had quickly become a voice of reason. Their federation, born from the ashes of their own violent past, was now recognized as a stabilizing force in galactic politics. What once seemed like a fleeting hope had blossomed into a genuine power. The humans were diplomatic, they were pragmatic, and most importantly, they had never sought domination. Until now. As the festivities began, a small group of human leaders gathered quietly in a private chamber of the summit hall. President Jonathan Hayes, the charismatic and steady leader of the Human Federation, looked out over the vast crowd through a grand observation window. He was accompanied by several high-ranking officials. Ilara Trent, the Federation's sharpest diplomat, General Marcus Holt, a veteran military strategist, and Dr. Evelyn Pierce, the brilliant scientist who had unlocked humanity's hidden potential. "It feels strange," Hayes murmured, his voice tinged with both pride and concern. "The galaxy's peace is fragile, but it's here." Ilara Trent stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the grandeur below. "They think they've won," she said, her voice low and measured. "That they've achieved something irreversible, but they don't understand what we're capable of. Not yet." Marcus Holt, ever the soldier, grunted, his arms folded across his chest. "They never do," he muttered. "They think we're just here to be the peacekeepers. But the truth is, we're the ones who've changed everything." Dr. Pierce, her mind always racing with ideas, glanced at her colleagues, a faint smile crossing her lips. "We've always been underestimated. It's in our nature. But it's not just about diplomacy anymore. It's about something far bigger, something they'll never see coming." The galaxy's leaders, unknowingly, had just entered a new phase of existence, one that they were not prepared for. While they celebrated the end of war, the humans were quietly engineering the means to become the ultimate force in the galaxy. From the banquet hall, a voice boomed an announcement, signaling the beginning of speeches. The galaxy's most powerful figures gathered to give their assurances, hoping to convince one another that peace would last. But the humans, content in their silence, understood something others did not. Peace was not the end of the story. For them, it was just the beginning. And the galaxy would soon realize that the humans weren't just here to join the peace. They were here to rewrite the rules. Months after the treaty was signed, the galaxy settled into its uneasy peace. The major powers maintained their fragile alliances, and while tensions never fully disappeared, the promise of a new era seemed to hold. In the quiet corners of the Human Federation, however, something extraordinary was happening. something that none of their galactic neighbors had suspected. In a clandestine research facility buried deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, a team of human scientists, led by Dr. Evelyn Pierce, was on the cusp of a discovery that would alter the course of history. For years, they had been working on a secret project, known only to a select few, Genesis. Its goal was not just to advance human technology, but to unlock the hidden potential encoded within humanity's very biology. Dr. Pierce, along with her team of geneticists, biologists, and neuroengineers, had been studying human DNA for patterns that other species had long considered mundane. They discovered something extraordinary, a dormant sequence of genes that, when activated, allowed humans to dramatically enhance their physical, mental, and even neurological capabilities. It wasn't a foreign element in human biology. It was already there, lying dormant, waiting for the right trigger. The implications were staggering. The human genome was capable of evolving far faster than any other species in the galaxy. The potential for humans to surpass even their most advanced allies, both in intelligence and strength, was undeniable. Yet it wasn't just about physical improvement. There was a more subtle, more dangerous facet. Humans could adapt their cognitive processes with unprecedented speed. In moments of crisis, their minds could recalibrate, developing new strategies, forming innovative solutions, and adjusting to threats in real time. The first experiment, a trial involving a small group of human volunteers, produced results that stunned the scientists. Subjects not only displayed heightened physical abilities, but their brains began operating at higher frequencies, processing data, solving complex problems, and learning new skills faster than any species in the galaxy could manage. But it wasn't just the intellectual feats that caught their attention. These humans could also sense patterns in chaos, anticipate outcomes, and adapt in ways that seemed impossible. News of this discovery, initially kept under wraps, began to leak. A classified report from Dr. Pierce's team was accidentally intercepted by an unnamed galactic intelligence service, and soon whispers of the human anomaly spread like wildfire. At first, many dismissed it as exaggerated propaganda, the boastful claims of an overzealous species. The humans were good at many things, but surely they couldn't possess the kind of genetic superiority that the report hinted at. That is, until they saw the results. At a public exhibition on the human-controlled world of Rionis, a demonstration was arranged, intended to showcase humanity's latest technological advancements. Instead, it showcased something entirely unexpected. Human volunteers were asked to solve an intricate puzzle that required not only intelligence, but also fine-tuned motor skills. A crowd of diplomats, representatives, and scientists from across the galaxy gathered to witness the event. When the puzzle was presented, the humans barely seemed to acknowledge its complexity. Within moments, they had not only solved it, but they had done so in ways that made the problem look childishly simple. The room fell silent. The murmurs began, quiet at first, then growing louder. The humans were not just clever. They were operating on a level that far surpassed the expectations of even the most sophisticated minds in the galaxy. And worse, they seemed to be doing it with ease. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer just a species of diplomats and survivors. They had unlocked a power that could elevate them beyond even the most advanced species. But the real terror was that no one knew exactly how far this potential could stretch, nor what they intended to do with it. In the weeks that followed, galactic leaders began to receive reports of strange phenomena. Human diplomats seemingly predicting their every move, human soldiers demonstrating near-superhuman combat abilities, and engineers solving technical problems that had stumped the brightest minds for centuries. The galaxy's peace, fragile as it was, began to feel uncertain. What had once seemed like a harmless species, content to join the ranks of the peaceful galactic powers, now seemed like something much more dangerous. The implications of humanity's genetic breakthrough were staggering, and the galaxy wasn't sure if they were ready for what came next. The galaxy had begun to feel uneasy. The first ripples of suspicion were quiet, whispers in the corners of diplomatic chambers, but they were growing louder by the day. Humanity, once seen as a minor force, a voice of peace in a turbulent galaxy, was now moving with a confidence that seemed unsettling. It wasn't just the intelligence or the sudden leaps in technological advancement. It was something more, something intangible that no one could quite put their finger on. The Federation's leaders were careful not to draw attention to the growing changes, but within the corridors of power on Earth, a quiet transformation was underway. The Genesis project had shifted into full-scale implementation. Volunteers from various branches of the Federation, diplomats, scientists, soldiers, had been quietly undergoing modifications, each one selected for their adaptability and willingness to push their own limits. The results were subtle at first. Soldiers returned from routine missions faster, stronger, and with fewer injuries than they had in the past. Scientists solved problems with impossible speed. Diplomats negotiated with a calm certainty, anticipating every move their counterparts made. But then came the mission to Zerlon, a border world in the midst of political upheaval, where the newly formed Galactic peace was being threatened by insurgents. The Council had sent a mixed crew of peacekeepers to mediate, but they were woefully unprepared for the hostile forces they would encounter. Zerlon was a world caught between factions, its resources rich but its people fractured. The mission was simple: help bring warring factions to the table, prevent a bloodbath, and restore order. But what the peacekeepers didn't expect was that the warring factions were not the real threat. It was the planet itself. On the eve of the peacekeepers' arrival, a new insurgent group, the Vol, a brutal paramilitary faction, launched a surprise attack. Their guerrilla warfare tactics were vicious and fast, with no respect for diplomatic protocols. The peacekeepers were quickly overwhelmed. The insurgents knew the terrain. They knew how to move unseen, how to make every engagement feel like a death trap. The Federation soldiers were outmatched, and it seemed only a matter of time before they were pinned down. That was until the humans, those few volunteers modified under Genesis, began to make their move. Human soldiers, who had been embedded in the peacekeeping unit, suddenly began to turn the tide of battle. Their movements were unnervingly precise. They read the terrain like it was their own backyard, anticipating the insurgents' every move before they made it. Their tactics were unorthodox, but effective. Where others saw chaos, the humans saw a web of opportunities. They outflanked the Vol with almost no resistance, cutting off their supply lines and systematically dismantling their command structure, all while adapting to every new tactic the insurgents threw at them. The final blow came when the insurgents attempted a last-ditch assault on the peacekeepers' headquarters. What they didn't know was that the humans had already infiltrated their ranks and had laid a trap. The insurgents walked straight into it. Within hours, the human-led peacekeepers decimated their forces and secured the planet. When the Federation commanders arrived on the scene, they were stunned. The humans had not just held their ground. They had orchestrated the insurgents' defeat as though it had been part of the plan all along. What had been expected to be a prolonged battle had turned into a resounding success, and all because of the humans' uncanny ability to adapt. News of the victory quickly spread through the galaxy, but with it came an unsettling realization. The humans were no longer just peacekeepers. They had demonstrated a level of cunning and adaptability that no one had anticipated. At least not this quickly. Even the galaxy's most advanced strategists, those who had studied the art of war for millennia, could not explain how the humans had done it. It wasn't just their training or their advanced weapons. It was something deeper, something that allowed them to turn the tide of battle before it had even begun. It was clear now. The humans weren't just participants in the peace they had helped broker. They were becoming its new architects. And if their potential was just beginning to unfold, the galaxy had only seen the faintest glimpse of what they could do. The victory on Zerlon was a turning point. The galaxy's powers were left shaken by the unexpected display of human ingenuity and adaptability. At first, many had whispered that it was a fluke, that the humans had simply gotten lucky, that the Vol insurgents were no match for their carefully honed military strategies. But as reports from other conflict zones trickled in, it became clear that something more was at play. Humanity wasn't just winning, they were rewriting the rules of warfare, and the galaxy didn't know how to react. Soon, strange reports began to surface from the edges of human-controlled space. Fleet commanders returned from missions with unsettling news. Entire enemy fleets had been wiped out, without a single shot fired. In some cases, even the most advanced military sensors failed to detect any activity at all. Ships had simply gone silent, disappeared. The enemy never knew what hit them. But the most chilling of these reports came from the Caresi Empire. The Caresi, a ruthless and fearsome species, were notorious for their brutal war tactics and their technological superiority. Their ships were practically indestructible, their military might the stuff of legends. For centuries, they had operated as a major force of destruction in the galaxy. No one had ever dared to challenge them, not directly. The idea of the Caresi being wiped out was unimaginable. And yet that was precisely what seemed to have happened. A human exploratory fleet had stumbled upon a Caresi battalion at the far edge of human-controlled space. The Caresi had no reason to be there. There was nothing of value, no strategic purpose to be gained. Yet when the humans engaged them, they met no resistance. At first, it seemed like a tactical retreat on the part of the Caresi, but as the humans scoured the area, they found the remnants of the Caresi fleet, completely destroyed. The ships had been gutted, their systems fried from within, their crews nowhere to be found. Not a single shot had been exchanged. The humans had arrived on the scene too late to find the answers. The only message left behind was an encrypted transmission from the Caresi Emperor himself, broadcast to all who would listen. The humans have come to claim what was never theirs. The transmission was chilling in its simplicity. The Caresi, it seemed, had been eliminated without a single human soldier stepping foot on their ships. The question that now hung in the air was simple. How had the humans done it? The galaxy's political and military leaders convened in secret. The Caresi had long been seen as the pinnacle of power in the galaxy. If humanity had taken them down so effortlessly, what did that say about their own security? How could they be sure that the humans, with their rapidly growing technological and military might, weren't building up to something far greater than anyone could imagine? In the following weeks, a strange quiet settled over the galaxy. Officially, the humans claimed that they had simply outsmarted the Caresi, that it had been an intelligence operation, a calculated maneuver that had disabled the Caresi fleet from within. But something about the silence that followed the event felt different. There were no human boasts, no public celebrations of victory. There were only whispers in the shadows, rumors of strange new technologies, of weapons the galaxy had never seen. As human diplomats continued their peaceful outreach, securing new alliances with smaller factions, the leaders of the galaxy began to wonder. Was humanity truly a force for peace, or had they simply used the treaty as a cover for something far more dangerous? The peace they had once celebrated seemed less secure with every passing day. Humanity, it seemed, wasn't just seeking coexistence. They were quietly laying the groundwork for something much larger, something that no one, not even the most advanced empires, could foresee. And the worst part, the galaxy still had no idea what it would look like when humanity finally decided to take what they believed was theirs. As the days passed, the galaxy began to breathe a little easier, at least outwardly. Publicly, no one dared question the sudden shift in power. No one openly challenged humanity's influence. The diplomatic efforts continued as scheduled, with the Federation's ambassadors making steady strides toward securing alliances, establishing trade agreements, and reinforcing their presence in distant sectors. But behind closed doors, the cracks in the facade began to deepen. The leaders of the galactic powers were still reeling from the disappearance of the Caresi fleet, and the unsettling silence that followed the event only added to their fears. If the humans could topple an empire as powerful as the Caresi without a single shot being fired, then what were they capable of? And perhaps more importantly, how had they done it? In a secure meeting on the Shaldar homeworld, a summit of the galaxy's most influential leaders convened. President Hayes had been invited, ostensibly as part of a diplomatic outreach. Yet the discussions had quickly turned to more serious matters. The presence of a human delegation was, at this point, less about peace and more about surveillance. Every leader knew it. There was something the humans weren't telling them, something they were hiding beneath the surface. "We cannot ignore the truth any longer," Grand Admiral Severeth, leader of the Vortoth Dominion, growled, his massive frame shifting uneasily in his seat. "The Caresi. No one could have destroyed them. No one except a force that understands them inside and out. And I don't buy this intelligence operation nonsense. The Caresi would have seen through that." Chancellor Arlane of the Xelfar clicked his mandibles in irritation. "The truth is, we have no idea what the humans are doing. They've been too careful. They've been too quiet." His eyes narrowed. "We cannot sit idly by and wait for them to decide when to reveal their cards. They must be contained." Hayes, sitting across from them, didn't flinch. His posture was unyielding, though his mind raced. He had known this moment would come. He had seen the signs in the increasing frequency of subtle threats, in the way the galaxy's powers began to test the boundaries of diplomacy. But there was nothing he could do to stop it now. Humanity had already crossed a line, and the galaxy could sense the danger, even if they didn't fully understand it. "They are afraid." Hayes finally spoke, his voice steady, "and they have every right to be. The question, though, is why? Why are you so afraid of a species that has only ever offered peace?" The room fell silent. Severath's glare was the first to cut through the tension. "We are afraid because we don't understand you. We don't know what you're capable of, and that makes you dangerous. We all know that peace cannot last without trust, and right now, trust is in short supply. And if the humans have proven anything," Arlane added with a venomous hiss, "it's that they are too clever for their own good." Hayes met their eyes, and for a long moment, there was a weight between them. He knew the truth. The humans had become a force that no one could control, and if left unchecked, they might soon dominate the galaxy without a single weapon raised in anger. But he couldn't say that. Instead, he offered them a simple, composed smile. "We are not interested in domination," Hayes said softly. "We are simply interested in surviving, and in making sure that when the time comes, we are prepared to protect ourselves. If that makes us dangerous in your eyes, then so be it." The meeting ended without further resolution, but the distrust lingered. The leaders departed, each of them returning to their respective empires with a sense of urgency in their hearts. There were whispered rumors of covert operations being planned against human assets, of surveillance intensifying, of fleets being mobilized in secret. The fear that had quietly simmered beneath the surface was beginning to boil over. But in the shadows, humanity's greatest strength remained hidden. Their ability to evolve faster than anyone could anticipate. Their true power had yet to be revealed. And the galaxy, for all its posturing, had no idea how quickly that would change. The storm that had been quietly brewing across the galaxy had finally reached a tipping point. The major powers were now all too aware of the existential threat they believed humanity posed. While official peace treaties remained intact, underneath the surface, the fragile veneer of diplomacy was cracking. Quiet assassinations, covert sabotage, and espionage, human assets and sympathizers across the galaxy, were slowly being targeted by the shadowy factions that now saw humanity as a growing danger. The galaxy's powers, unified under the guise of peace, were taking drastic measures to safeguard their future. But in the midst of all this, the Federation remained unfazed, their outward display of calm a mask for something far deeper. President Jonathan Hayes had known that tensions were rising, but he also knew something his adversaries didn't. Humanity was no longer simply trying to coexist in this galaxy. They were preparing to take control of their destiny, but in a way no one could predict. Humanity's strength lay in its adaptability, and they had perfected it. The Genesis Project, now expanded into every branch of Federation activity, was no longer just a genetic enhancement program. It had evolved into a complex web of advanced bioengineering, neurointegration, and quantum computing, technologies that enabled humans to think and evolve faster than any other species could comprehend. It wasn't just that the humans had unlocked latent potential within themselves. They had fused their biology with their technology, creating a hybrid mind capable of perceiving multiple dimensions of reality and manipulating data streams with precision. The Federation scientists had developed a network, a series of quantum-encoded neural pathways that enabled entire fleets to be commanded by a single individual. Each officer, soldier, and diplomat was connected to this ever-expanding web of intelligence, forming a collective consciousness that could process billions of data points in real time. Dr. Evelyn Pierce had led this project, her work now reaching a scale that had been incomprehensible even to her. The first Genesis volunteers had evolved into something beyond human, a fusion of organic and digital minds, capable of making decisions before even the data itself had settled. The Genesis program was not merely a new weapon, it was humanity's final answer to galactic chaos. But the galaxy had yet to understand this. From their perspective, humanity was still a growing power, unstable, unproven, and most dangerously, unpredictable. Their surprise attacks on enemy fleets, their ability to outthink and outmaneuver any foe, had made them seem like ghosts in the system, more myth than reality. But behind the scenes, the Federation's true capabilities were being built at an exponential rate. It was only a matter of time before the first major confrontation arrived. The spark ignited on the neutral world of Trelaris, a planet rich in natural resources, currently a joint venture between the Shaldar, Vortoth, and Zelfar. The Federation had recently begun extending its influence in the sector, seeking new trade routes and alliances, but their arrival was met with hostility. The combined forces of the three major empires had grown increasingly paranoid, and their efforts to push the Federation out of the region grew more aggressive. An ultimatum was issued, one that Hayes knew was impossible to accept. Trelaris became the stage for humanity's first true test of their new power. The combined forces of the three empires outnumbered the human fleet, but they were no match for the technological revolution humanity had quietly built. Under Hayes' orders, the Federation fleet entered Trelaris's orbit, but they made no move to fire a shot. Instead, they broadcasted a single message, a warning encrypted in quantum code that only the most advanced species could comprehend. The message was simple, yet profound. This is the future. Join us, or face extinction. The combined forces of the Shaldar, Vortoth, and Selfar hesitated. For a moment, their leaders convened in secrecy, trying to decipher the message, trying to understand what it meant. But before they could act, the humans made their move. A new weapon, something more advanced than any previous technology, activated from within the Federation fleet. Ships flickered, and suddenly, the three fleets found themselves at the mercy of humanity's control. The Federation had unleashed a quantum lock, a system that interfaced directly with the command and control systems of enemy ships, rendering them completely inert. The fleets, once formidable and powerful, were now nothing more than floating corpses in the void. The message was clear. Humanity had just changed the rules of engagement. As the three empires stood frozen in space, Hayes spoke again, his voice cold and unyielding. The era of your dominance is over. This galaxy is ours to shape, not yours. In the wake of the unprecedented event, the galaxy's political landscape shifted dramatically. The peace the empires had once celebrated seemed to slip further away, replaced by a growing fear that humanity had already achieved the unthinkable, control over the galaxy's future. Humanity was no longer just a rising power. They had become the galaxy's invisible hand, pulling the strings from the shadows, and no one knew if they would ever stop. The galaxy, once a vast network of conflicting interests, began to shift in unimaginable ways. In the wake of humanity's display of power over the Trelaris system, The political climate was forever altered. The three empires, Shaldar, Vortoth, and Selthar, had been humiliated. Their fleets, once symbols of dominance, lay dormant in the void, their control shattered by a single human maneuver. Fear was now the dominant emotion rippling through the galaxy's power structures. No longer was humanity seen as merely another species in a fractured piece. They were something else entirely, an unknown variable capable of overwhelming any force they deemed an obstacle. Behind closed doors, the rulers of the galaxy began to conspire. The fact that humanity had so easily neutralized entire fleets without a single shot being fired could not be overlooked. But what terrified them most wasn't the loss of their ships. It was the loss of their autonomy. For the first time in their histories, they faced an enemy they could not understand or control. And humanity wasn't even using weapons in the traditional sense. They had rendered the most advanced fleets inoperable with a mere broadcast. An encrypted transmission had shattered centuries of military superiority. This was the weapon humanity wielded now. Information, combined with technology and biology in ways never before seen. The Federation's rapid rise was a threat to more than just military power. It was a challenge to the status quo of the entire galaxy. It made no sense. The peace treaty, the very thing that had kept the galaxy stable, was now being used against them, not as a safeguard, but as a tool to change the rules. Humanity, for all their talk of peace and diplomacy, had created a new order without anyone's consent. The question no longer was, what are they doing? But rather, what will they do next? President Hayes understood the gravity of the situation more than anyone. Humanity's ability to outpace everyone else had made them a threat. Perhaps not a physical one, but a psychological one. If the galaxy's leaders were ever to regain control, they would have to break the chains of peace that humanity had silently wrapped around them. Despite the growing unrest, the Federation maintained its diplomatic facade. Trade deals continued, new systems were explored, and peaceful negotiations were held in conference rooms and chambers across the galaxy. Yet, beneath it all, the foundations were crumbling. The leaders who had once celebrated the end of conflict now found themselves in the midst of a quiet war. This was not a war of armies or fleets. This was a war of influence, of perception, and of ideology. The humans, however, were not blind to this undercurrent of hostility. They knew the galaxy was mobilizing against them, knew that every handshake held a silent dagger behind it. But rather than retreating or tightening their grip on power, the Federation expanded. Slowly, they began establishing colonies and bases in systems far outside their previous reach. These were not military strongholds, at least, not in the traditional sense. They were bastions of research, places where humanity's true strength could grow undisturbed. These outposts, scattered across the galaxy like seeds, were filled with human scientists and engineers working on technologies so advanced that even the brightest minds of the galaxy couldn't fathom them. What the galaxy didn't know was that the humans weren't interested in subjugation. They weren't looking to rule. They were looking to evolve, to take the first step into a new future where the very fabric of civilization was rewritten. They knew that peace could not last forever, but they had come to understand that war, as it had been known for centuries, was obsolete. War was inefficient. Conflict, to humanity, had become a relic of an old era, a time when brute force was the only way to assert control. And humanity had evolved beyond that. Yet, even in their growing strength, there was a quiet understanding among the Federation leadership that they couldn't remain passive. Even if humanity wasn't actively seeking domination, they were on the verge of creating a new order, one where the galaxy's empires, with all their weapons and politics, would become irrelevant. There was no stopping it now. And as long as humanity's influence grew, so too did the uneasy silence that stretched across the stars. In this silence, a new kind of battle was taking place. It was a battle for the very soul of the galaxy. The galaxy, once a vast network of conflicting interests, began to shift in unimaginable ways. In the wake of humanity's display of power over the Trelleris system, The political climate was forever altered. The three empires, Shaldar, Vortoth, and Selthar, had been humiliated. Their fleets, once symbols of dominance, lay dormant in the void, their control shattered by a single human maneuver. Fear was now the dominant emotion rippling through the galaxy's power structures. No longer was humanity seen as merely another species in a fractured piece. They were something else entirely, an unknown variable capable of overwhelming any force they deemed an obstacle. Behind closed doors, the rulers of the galaxy began to conspire. The fact that humanity had so easily neutralized entire fleets without a single shot being fired could not be overlooked. But what terrified them most wasn't the loss of their ships. It was the loss of their autonomy. For the first time in their histories, they faced an enemy they could not understand or control. And humanity wasn't even using weapons in the traditional sense. They had rendered the most advanced fleets inoperable with a mere broadcast. An encrypted transmission had shattered centuries of military superiority. This was the weapon humanity wielded now. Information, combined with technology and biology in ways never before seen. The Federation's rapid rise was a threat to more than just military power. It was a challenge to the status quo of the entire galaxy. It made no sense. The peace treaty, the very thing that had kept the galaxy stable, was now being used against them. Not as a safeguard, but as a tool to change the rules. Humanity, for all their talk of peace and diplomacy, had created a new order without anyone's consent. The question no longer was, what are they doing? But rather, what will they do next? President Hayes understood the gravity of the situation more than anyone. Humanity's ability to outpace everyone else had made them a threat. Perhaps not a physical one, but a psychological one. If the galaxy's leaders were ever to regain control, they would have to break the chains of peace that humanity had silently wrapped around them. Despite the growing unrest, the Federation maintained its diplomatic facade. Trade deals continued, new systems were explored, and peaceful negotiations were held in conference rooms and chambers across the galaxy. Yet, beneath it all, the foundations were crumbling. The leaders who had once celebrated the end of conflict now found themselves in the midst of a quiet war. This was not a war of armies or fleets. This was a war of influence, of perception, and of ideology. The humans, however, were not blind to this undercurrent of hostility. They knew the galaxy was mobilizing against them, knew that every handshake held a silent dagger behind it. But rather than retreating or tightening their grip on power, the Federation expanded. Slowly, they began establishing colonies and bases in systems far outside their previous reach. These were not military strongholds, at least, not in the traditional sense. They were bastions of research, places where humanity's true strength could grow undisturbed. These outposts, scattered across the galaxy like seeds, were filled with human scientists and engineers working on technologies so advanced that even the brightest minds of the galaxy couldn't fathom them. What the galaxy didn't know was that the humans weren't interested in subjugation. They weren't looking to rule. They were looking to evolve, to take the first step into a new future where the very fabric of civilization was rewritten. They knew that peace could not last forever, but they had come to understand that war, as it had been known for centuries, was obsolete. War was inefficient. Conflict, to humanity, had become a relic of an old era, a time when brute force was the only way to assert control. And humanity had evolved beyond that. Yet, even in their growing strength, there was a quiet understanding among the Federation leadership that they couldn't remain passive. Even if humanity wasn't actively seeking domination, they were on the verge of creating a new order. One where the galaxy's empires, with all their weapons and politics, would become irrelevant. There was no stopping it now. And as long as humanity's influence grew, so too did the uneasy silence that stretched across the stars. In this silence, a new kind of battle was taking place. It was a battle for the very soul of the galaxy. The day the galaxy realized the inevitable was coming was not marked by a massive battle or a great act of destruction. It was quieter than that, subtle, yet unavoidably clear. Humanity had reshaped the rules of the universe, but now they were ready to define the new order. They had prepared, quietly and methodically, for a future where their way of life would no longer just survive, but thrive. President Hayes stood before a vast holographic display, the culmination of years of planning, research, and ambition. He watched as fleets of human ships, now equipped with revolutionary technologies, spread across the galaxy like tendrils. These were not just warships or peaceful vessels. They were the first phase of an initiative that would change the very structure of galactic governance. They were the harbingers of the Synthesis Project, a convergence of biology, technology, and philosophy that would integrate every species into a singular, connected existence. And humanity had made the first move. The galaxy's response was, predictably, panic. Whispers spread like wildfire. The Shaldar, once confident in their military might, began to consider whether their fleets would be enough to combat the encroaching influence of the Federation. The Vortoth, emboldened by their own secret military projects, scrambled to shore up their defenses. The Xelthar, now terrified of losing their political influence, secretly began forging alliances with dissidents from other empires. The empires, united in distrust of humanity, did what they had always done in times of crisis. They looked to war. But humanity, as they had always done, responded differently. Rather than striking back with force, the Federation's fleets positioned themselves in orbit around critical systems, their power absolute but passive. They had no intention of starting an all-out war. Instead, they began broadcasting, quietly, at first, messages encoded in ancient languages, in symbols, in art and sound, speaking directly to the heart of the galaxy. They were offering something the other empires had never thought to offer: true unity. "You've been divided for too long," Hayes's voice echoed in the vast reaches of space, "fighting over resources, over borders, over ideals that no longer matter. The galaxy is a fractured thing, and its future is uncertain. We offer you something else. We offer you connection, evolution, and shared purpose." The Synthesis Project was humanity's answer to millennia of intergalactic strife. It was the culmination of the Genesis Initiative, a new frontier in collective intelligence and empathy. The Federation had used its advanced technologies not to crush or conquer, but to enhance every being they encountered. For the first time in galactic history, humans had found a way to offer true integration, a merger of minds, a symbiosis between species that would erase borders, mistrust, and inequality. At first, the galaxy scoffed. Many saw the broadcast as nothing more than an audacious political maneuver, a means of pacifying the galaxy into submission. But as humanity's influence spread, something began to change. There was no military threat, no weapons aimed at the empires, just an invitation to join something larger, something unified, something better. The first few empires began to open their doors. The Caresi, the ones who had been toppled by a whisper, found themselves tentatively testing the waters, offering their most advanced minds to humanity's cause. The Xelthar, long consumed by internal division, sought refuge in the idea of unity, willing to set aside centuries of ancient feuds for a glimpse of the future humanity promised. Even the Shaldar, fierce and proud, began to soften their stance, knowing that the alternative was far worse than submission. Humanity had proven itself capable of unimaginable feats, not through conquest, but through the quiet, unstoppable force of innovation. And in the end, it was the very essence of that innovation that won the galaxy's greatest battle, the battle for the future. As President Hayes stood before the Council of Ambassadors, now more numerous and diverse than ever before, he realized that the galaxy was no longer the same. The dream of a united, peaceful existence was no longer a distant hope, but a present reality. The final barrier had been breached, not by weapons or violence, but by the simple truth that humanity had something the galaxy had never seen before, the vision to build a better future for everyone. "The new order begins now," Hayes spoke, his voice carrying the weight of history. We are not here to rule. We are here to guide. The future is not something to fear, but something to shape together. Welcome to the dawn of the new age. As the Federation's flag, now adorned with symbols of unity, waved across the galaxy, the universe realized that peace had not been imposed. It had been built, and humanity, against all odds, had become the architects of a new era.